welcome to another episode of the Resisting Beta podcast. I am Andrew Bontz, your host, and we are here with another special guest, Geoff Gloak. He is an amazing health coach, and here are some questions that I have for Geoff. So, how do we eat for optimal energy level? Because for me, I get really sluggish, and I don't know if it's my diet or something else, because I've been trying to diagnose getting enough sleep at night, but it still seems that I run out of creative energy halfway through the day. So I'm really curious on Geoff's input on that. And how do we finally hit that paradigm moment in our health that finally shifts us away from the results that we've gotten over the past, 20, 15, 20, 30 years as an adult, that has gotten us to where we're at, right? How can we just get off of this slide that we're on, or maybe over this plateau, or at least maybe even you're on a downward slide and your health is, you put on that COVID 20 pounds and you're like, oh crap, I don't know what the hell I'm doing or how to get out of this stuff. So a little bit about Geoff. Geoff's a health coach. He really helps men increase their energy and their vitality. So coaching, he really brings in more of a holistic perspective. So he includes things like yoga and meditation and even body psychotherapy, which I'm not super familiar with that one. So Geoff, I really appreciate you being here, man. Thank you so much.
Likewise, Andrew. I'm glad to be here, and I really appreciate what you're doing with this podcast. It's awesome. I've been listening to a few of your past episodes, and I get value out of every single one.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. So let's fill them in a little bit on who you are and what you do, and maybe get the Reader's Digest version of your story.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I think for me, it's interesting because I'm me. But I grew up in a diner, actually. My parents' house was attached to the diner. When I would wake up in the morning, I'd bang on my bedroom wall, and my mom would be waitressing, and she would actually hear me. She'd come to a window that connected the two, and she would ask me what I wanted for breakfast, tell me to go turn on the television and get dressed, and she'd bring in whatever I was going to eat and what have you. And I didn't grow up in the healthiest of environments, much like many of us. And I had my early childhood traumas that went unaddressed. My parents weren't really prepared to deal with that type of thing, and went through a lot of stuff throughout the next few decades, right? Teenage years were tough, but there was a thread that went through my life of connection with spirit, really, spirituality. And that started at a young age, about 11. If you call me an altar boy, it started even being spiritual. It was even younger than that. So our diner and house was right near a church. And that's where I was an altar boy, and that's where the Catholic school was that I went to. It was a neat way to grow up, right in the community. But it was when I was about 19, I had moved from upstate New York to California, and I had friends who were practicing yoga. And it was new. It was new to me at the time, and it was not the craze that it has since become. But I started practicing, and that's where I would say my own personal practices began. It was about 10 years later, I learned transcendental meditation. Crazy. In my Catholic school, I had a 6th grade teacher who practiced TM and used to talk to us about it. And so it's planted a seed. So 10 years, when I'm in my late 20s, I start practicing meditation. And then in my young 30s, I go through a divorce, right? My marriage doesn't work out. Common story, as you and I have talked about earlier, and you've talked about on other podcasts. And that was a real wake-up call for me. And that's when I dove into body psychotherapy. So you can sit and talk to somebody all day long about whatever's going on with you and about your problems, and it can help a lot, right? But you've heard the term before, the issues are in the tissues, right? So whatever is driving those patterns for us ends up getting planted in our body, and not just in our physical body, but in our energy field around us, right? And it gets stuck there. So the beautiful thing about body psychotherapy, and there's different kinds, is that you kind of work with the body. You bring the body into that process of healing, right? So in some practices, that might be the clients laying on a table and the practitioner has their hands on them and is working with them like that. And the type that I learned, and I studied actually for 5 years, it's called core energetics. And it's a much more, I think you would like this, man. It's a much more engaged type of an experiential type of therapy. Tennis racket and pillows or big foam cube and just going for it, very primal, letting it out. Because a lot of times what's bothering us is really deeply stored in there. Getting back to that and then moving, we all have energy blocked up in our body, moving that energy through in any one of a variety of ways. There's lots of techniques to do that. Some are more still, but some are more energized. So that's what that's about body psychotherapy, core energetics. And yeah. So that's a bit about me.
So this topic is one of those, I think is growing as far as level of understanding and maybe interest, but I still think it's one of those services or at least topics that most men haven't explored. And it's, if you play the woo-woo card, you're like, hold on a second. All that sounds pretty outside of my comfort zone. I have to hear a couple stories on like maybe some transformations that you have either seen yourself or seen in other people or seen for some of your clients. I'm curious on some of those stories so it can help some of the men maybe open their mind a little bit to a little bit outside the box thinking when it comes to thinking about their own energy, who they are, and getting over some of that where they're blocked internally.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess what I would say is it's always best to start with yourself, right? And for me, my mother committed suicide when I was 3. So when I refer to my mom working in the diner, that's actually her mom. That was my grandmother, who I came to call mom. And so that left a lot of wounds, right? And a lot of scars. And that sort of manifests in my view of the world in a way where, because the mother it's your grounding in life, right? For me, having lost my mom early on like that at such a formative age, that left me in a place where I don't feel real safe in the world, right? My natural thing is to feel like I'm being rejected, like I don't fit in, like I don't belong, right? That's the inner dialogue that's always in the background for me. And even to this day, it rears its ugly head. And it's wrong to even call it ugly because it's there, it's trying to protect me, right? It's a voice that's trying to protect me. But so for me, it's hard for me to imagine, and one of your recent guests, Dave Durand, was talking about God quite a bit. And I related to him in a way that I was like, yeah, it's hard for me to imagine sort of life without spirituality and without a connection with higher power. Right? Because it does lay down some guiding principles for us. But yeah, that's not everybody's thing. And that's okay. But I would say that doing the physical components of yoga, and bringing in that body psychotherapy over in my training, because of course I did a lot, I had to do the work to be to be in the training. So I had to do a lot of work on my own. And getting underneath some of that messaging, some of that inner messaging, it was a game changer for me. And it brought me to a place where now I have a beautiful wife and daughter and a beautiful family. And I'm able to feel like I can take risks in life and not going to end up out on the street or what have you. Yeah, it makes a lot of big difference.
So psychotherapy might be a little bit new to some of the men listening.
Sure.
So how would you explain it to your like a 5th grader? What is psychotherapy and like how does it help you?
Great question. When I think about it a little bit differently than I'm sure the typical therapist does, but we all have, so if I was talking to a 5th grader, I would say we all have things we're struggling with. And sometimes it helps to be able to talk through it with someone. And sometimes we get stuck in a certain pattern of thinking or with certain beliefs that influence how we feel in the world. And if we can get at those beliefs And those patterns, through talking through them or through moving through them or maybe shouting through them, right? Then that can make a big difference in our lives and help us to be in a place where we can bring ourselves more fully into the world and do what it is we need to do.
So most men haven't been trained or practice understanding what they're feeling or the emotion their body is telling them. So, and they're blocked in several different things, probably as a result to trauma or unresolved trauma, that kind of stuff. So, what typical symptoms do you see with men that maybe you know or have known or in yourself that you see, you're like, oh man, this guy's blocked up and he could benefit from the therapy that someone like yourself would help him with? What does his life look like?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you. So you're a parent, I'm a parent. And when you start talking about childhood wounding, you start thinking to yourself, oh my God, what am I doing to my kids? Well, none of us escapes childhood without wounds. And I think that is something really fundamental that we all need to understand, that especially as parents, right? As kids, we're just going through it and we're experiencing it. And if we have you've tuned in parents, they can help us, they can help see what's going on sometimes. But as it's like the life journey, right? It's part of your life journey that you're going to come out of childhood with some stuff. So one pattern is where energy gets blocked and it's not moving, right? So that can surface in different ways. But I'm going to be honest with you. I don't meet anyone who I don't have in the back of my mind, I'm going, oh, yeah, I can see. You start to get tuned into energy and you can see where their blocks are, right? For some people, they have blocks in their belly, right? Around their belly, above and below. They have a real hard time with that weight in their belly. Of course, that can be eating too much sugar too, but that can all tie together. Right. So for other people, and I tend to be more like this, where it's not so much blocks, but disconnection in energy. The tall, thin, wrangly type of person whose energy doesn't flow as well through their bodies. And so it's not so much it's getting stored, but it's jagged. Other people are extremely rigid, right? And are holding themselves very still and tough and protecting their hearts. Those are some of the kind of effects of that childhood that come out of our childhood and that we just implant into our body, right? So then it's with the last category, how would you soften their heart? How would you look at that? What are you protecting yourself from?
So you're using the term energy, and I think most people hear that term, it's associated with, if I'm not fatigued, I have energy. When I drink coffee, it gives me energy. But we're talking about energy in a different way. And I wonder if you could help me get clarity on, do you actually mean by if your energy is off, and like how you look at it from your holistic viewpoint, and helping shift that understanding of energy is more than if you're just the opposite of being tired, right?
Yeah, I love that. Being tired is certainly a manifestation of it, but it can be. But for me, I see it a lot in clarity of mind. When I'm sharp and able to be aware of my surroundings, aware of the conversations, whatever it is that's going on in my environment, without as much of the little mental chatter going on for me. And that's one of the ways I dose my own energy is when I walk every morning. I take a walk down my road, and it's not a long walk, but it's an opportunity. And part of it, there's a couple types of different things that I listen to that are awesome, that I would recommend, that we can talk about more. But then part of it, I make sure to turn it off. So I have silence, right? It's just me, and I can tune in to myself and my relationship to the environment and the world around me. When I say the environment, I mean just the trees and the sky, the world around me and what's going on. And it's pretty apparent for me then what is happening for me in my mind space. And am I able to relax into it and feel that sort of connection with the world? Or am I just going back up to the little mind and chatter, right? So that's one manifestation of flowing, clear energy versus blocked up or head up energy, right? We want our energy to be flowing all the way through our body, but hey, we live in the Western world in 2023, and we live up in here, right? So we want to bring that out in a more broad, grounded way.
So it's almost, I like that distinction to where it's optimizing what you do, what you eat, all of the different criteria to first start with clarity, right? To where are you able to think unencumbered for long periods of time? Are you able to sit in silence with yourself without feeling anxious or anxiety or seeking noise or distraction? Because I think that one of the things that I've really enjoyed over the last few years is getting outside, getting out in nature. And when I first started doing it, I would almost miss having headphones on, listening to music or listening to a podcast. But when I was out, I would feel called to just turn it off and just listen to what's happening and just pay attention to what's going on around me. And I think through that process, I just got more comfortable just being with myself, right? Just being alone and experiencing the things around me. And through this transformation, now it's really weird to where now I can feel when other people's energy is off. Like now I can have a coffee with somebody and I can get through the bullshit of, hey, how are you? And they're like, oh, yeah, pretty good. And I can feel, sometimes I can feel like that's off. Like, I feel like there's something you need to tell me and you just don't know how to do it, or you don't want to, or you're scared, or maybe I just haven't opened the door yet. So I wanted to open that door for you if there's anything you just really want to get off their chest. And every single time my intuition is spot on, just spot on. But I've never had that experience in my life because I was so worried about being somebody or being who the other person wanted me to be, or trying to be transactional and get something out of the conversation if it was more of a business conversation or sales conversation or whatnot. But I don't know, I can't quite place exactly what I did to be where I'm at, but I'm curious on your perspective on how one would go about leaning into that transformation.
So I love that what you're doing is it sounds to me like it's intuition, right? And so you're using your intuition to not only be with whoever you're with, but to also help them be with themselves. You asked earlier about what psychotherapy is. And to me, that is a beautiful manifestation of it, right? Like a beautiful way of practicing it is helping people to emerge into their full self. And so you're doing that at micro, or maybe it's not so micro levels when you're chatting with people. So I love that. But your question is, let's get back to it. I don't think I answered your question. I more commented on your practice, which I love. But help me understand your question.
Sure. So if someone is stuck in their own head, not present for whatever reason, right now the word anxiety is getting thrown around a lot. I just feel anxious, a lot of social anxiety, all that, especially with COVID and kids and, teenagers and that kind of stuff. That word is just all over the place. And I'm wondering, how can one start to create little changes away from getting stuck in their own damn head and being able to quiet those voices that are either encouraging them to build up that little ball of anger that like some people are just like driving with road rage and just everyone's an asshole. And I don't know why. There's just so many assholes in this world, right? And you could just see them. It's like their sphincters this big and they're just clenching all day long. And their brain is spinning on all these stories, just justifying where they're at. Like, they're just seeking it out. And I feel like there's so many people just stuck in that whirlwind of inside their own mind that just isn't allowing them to just let it go, just move on, be present, be grateful, live in gratitude, and allow life to happen versus just trying to, especially men, trying to control the shit out of it. So until I get what I want, I'm just going to just grind and control and just force it. So how can men just start to take those steps from the first painting the picture that I painted to more of the ability to live presently?
Yeah. So, yeah, beyond it being so many people, it's like Western society, right? Like it is a epidemic of our current culture when you're talking about anxiety, living in the head, anger. And there are so many ways to approach this. And so one of the things I like to think about so sleep's a big deal, right? Sleep is obviously a huge deal. So I like to think about AM and PM bookends for the day, right? And I like to say that the PM bookend counts twice because it's going to affect how you sleep and it's going to affect how you feel the next day as a result. But so let's just talk about the morning and what people do when they wake up. So often they're grabbing their phone and going right into a media world and it's really, to some degree, it's really an artificial world. I was trying to have this discussion with my just turned 13-year-old daughter this week about, okay, we need to put aside the device, right? We need to spend time in the environment. And I'm not going to convince her to practice meditation in the morning, but to get up and to do something in the morning before we ever get to media inputs. I think that's a huge thing that can make a big difference for a lot of people. So even if you use your phone as an alarm, just turn it off. Don't pick it up and look at the news, right? Get up and let's develop. So what I do as a coach is I look for what's a habit that we can develop in the morning. What do you do after you look at your phone? How can we get you doing that beforehand? Maybe it's a meditation practice. Maybe it's a simple yoga practice. And for me, I'm one of the so here's something I want your listeners to know. Yoga is not about, and because I say it all the time, I say to people, yeah, something, I'll mention yoga and people say, I need more yoga. I need to be more flexible. And I'm like, yeah, it's not really about so much the stretching for me. It's about the mind-body connection, right? So to me, the best yoga is very simple, very gentle, and something you do when you start your day, right? Before you start getting all the inputs of the world. Breath is another, I think, key thing that can help us get us out of our heads. So we tend to breathe real shallow and through our mouth all too often. There's a simple breath you can do anytime is inhale through your nose, say through a count of, for me, 4. Somebody bigger like you, somebody taller. I heard on one of your earlier podcasts, you were 6'4". Right on, man. So for you, it might be an inhale of 6 and then exhale through the nose for a little bit longer. So maybe it's inhale 6, exhale 8, something like that calms our system down. It triggers our parasympathetic nervous system, which you can think of the parasympathetic as like a parachute, right? It brings us down. We fire ourselves up with caffeine, right? And then we crash, or sugar, or a combination of the two. Oh my God, I can't believe what I see people drinking in the morning. Or I see people like with a soda in the morning. You're just triggering throughout the day a process of crashing and then needing more of or wanting more of whatever it was that you had to bring you back up, right? So all of that is stimulating the adrenal system. And the adrenal system is fight or flight. And since we're not fighting and we're not running away, it goes up into our head and it turns into rampant thought, a lot of negative thought, a lot of anger and anxiety.
So the PM bookend. So there's the AM bookend, which I love already going there.
Yep.
So let's before we dive into the morning stuff, because that's my jam. I'm curious about the PM bookend here.
Oh man. So people think I'm crazy, but I stop eating 3 hours before I go to bed. And that doesn't seem like an unrealistic thing until you realize that may mean that I'm eating before my family, right? And that's just the way it's going to be because I know what a big difference that's going to make in my night of sleep. Just about everybody has a tracker on their wrist these days. And I can see the difference. If I go to bed, it doesn't even have to have been a big meal. If I have a snack at night, my early night sleep is not nearly the quality that it is if I finish eating 3 hours before I go to bed. So that's one thing that I strongly recommend. And for a lot of people, that's a big lifestyle change. Turning off all screens at least a half hour before bed, right? Because the light from our screens is throwing off our circadian rhythms. So our body thinks when we're looking at a screen, the nerve cells in our brain don't know enough to say, oh, it's just a screen. They think it's daylight. And they think that means that we should be awake and energetic. So a lot of people have trouble falling asleep. And unfortunately, the way a lot of people approach anxiety and the way they approach falling asleep is to take a drug. And that's how American of us to, instead of look at the root cause of the problem, look at what's a way that I can put a Band-Aid over it to make it better right now. That's one thing. Have you tried mouth taping yet?
I have not. I've heard about it.
I won't sleep without tape on my mouth now. Again, call me crazy.
I don't know how it would work with me with my...
No, the beard doesn't affect it. It doesn't affect it.
Oh, all right.
You take like a piece of medical tape, and I use two little pieces of medical tape right here. Now, I'm a mouth breather, so I wake up in the morning and my mouth's bone dry, and I've been sleeping with my mouth open all night. So this stops that. And when you're breathing through your mouth, that's also triggering that fight or flight kind of mindset. So breathing through the nose calms the nervous system. Breathing through the mouth builds up energy. So again, this is something that can really help people. And you can Google mouth taping, and there's tons of information about it out there. James Nestor wrote a book called Breathe. It came out a couple of years ago. That's where I first learned about it. And it's been a game changer for me. Turning out bright lights, right? In addition to just turning off screens, like dimming the lights in the house can make a big difference. Just getting your body ready to sleep so that think about it. If we didn't have electric lights and TVs, right? As the sun set and the night went on, we would just naturally rest and go to sleep. But that's not what we do, right? We keep ourselves pumped up, getting to bed before 10:30, because after 10:30, you get a second wind of adrenaline. And again, this is bio-individual. It's different from person to person. You're going, hey, I used to be the person that couldn't go to bed before 11:30, midnight. That would be like an early night for me. But for me, I had to reprioritize, and it makes a huge difference in the quality of my days and the quality of my sleep. Yeah, I would say those are the big things to hit on.
Yeah, I think that this is a topic that I've really dove deep in, is sleep, from just like I listened to a sleep optimization expert, and he talked about all these techniques that we've covered today, but even more so down a rabbit hole. But one of the things that I learned recently, because a lot of people, I think people like alcohol, right? I'm gonna have a glass of wine to wind down, or a beer, a couple drinks to help me sleep, which we all know, most people know that's not going to give you really good sleep. So then I went to melatonin, right? some melatonin. I was like, oh, it's healthy. It's a supplement, whatever. And then I learned that taking melatonin isn't necessarily the best thing either. What is your opinion on melatonin, taking a supplement or a gummy or whatever for melatonin to help fall asleep?
So I think it's great to explore sleep supplements to help with sleep, and there's definitely a lot out there. I have steered away from melatonin. The body produces its own melatonin, so if we are going to supplement with it, we can throw off that production. I like to look at things like magnesium. L-theanine is an amino acid that can help people wind down. It can also help people when they have like jitters from caffeine. It helps settle them down. GABA is an interesting thing to look at. But I think it really comes down to individuals and, what experimenting. I think you got to experiment for yourself and see what works for you. And maybe you're okay without any supplements. I guess most people are pretty deficient in magnesium, which there's different types of magnesium, and magnesium can definitely help with sleep. If you get leg cramps, sometimes I do, potassium before bed is good. And a cup of tea, right? I use hop tea. I haven't drank alcohol in 3 years, but I still drink hop tea. And hop, one of the components of beer. And I love that. That's super relaxing. So you find what works for you. And actually, this is pretty cool. My 12-year-old daughter started using like a yoga app on my phone to help her sleep better. And she swears by it. Oh, I said 12. She just turned 13 this week. She'd kill me. But she's finding that that's been amazing for her. I don't like something talking to me as I'm going to bed. I don't want that. And I don't need that. I fall asleep pretty quickly. But yeah, I think I would tend to steer away. I would try other things. And I guess the supplements, the gummies or whatever that you get around that have melatonin in them, have a lot more melatonin than what would be recommended for, say you're going to get a short night of sleep. And so you're going to get some melatonin to help with that. It's a much smaller dose usually. And off the top of my head, I don't know. I don't have that right in front of me. I'd have to do some research.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I was taking it because I used to have a cocktail, and I stopped that. And I've changed a lot of stuff. And I noticed that when I revert back to my old habits to where if I play video games too late, I have a really hard time falling asleep. So then I have to like do stuff to help fall asleep, whether it be I drink tea pretty often, and sometimes you have to do stuff to wind down. But I found for me, it's the morning walk, trying to get out there in the first couple hours of the day for a half hour. For me, it's just to get out, get some sunlight, and listen to a podcast. And sometimes I'll listen to it the whole time, sometimes not the whole time. And then I'll turn up, have a cup of tea, and it seems like the days that I really follow my routine, I sleep really well.
Yeah, definitely.
And the days I break my rules, I sleep like crap.
You got right. The protocol makes all the difference. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So as we look at this whole bookends of sleep, you've talked about the morning ritual and the evening ritual. Is there any missing pieces to glue this together, or is it more so just making sure you have that morning process or routine and then the evening process routine? And by doing both of them, we're setting ourselves up for the best sleep for that given moment or that given day. Is there any missing pieces that we need to dive into a little bit further?
I like to think about, first of all, we want to get that 7 to 8 hours of sleep, right? So for a lot of people, that's a challenge. For me, it's a working edge because that means I have to go to bed at 9:30 at night because I get up at 4:30 in the morning because I have my practice in the morning, the things that I do. So that's one thing. I think looking at when we're talking about like our energy throughout the day, I think it's important to think about what we're eating for breakfast. So you had mentioned earlier that you tend to crash in the afternoon probably. So I was crashing in the morning, believe it or not. 10:30 in the morning, I was having an energy drop. And I'm working out. Workouts can enervate us too, right? They can drain but I wasn't doing that kind of workout. I was doing a pretty moderate workout. I'm walking, I'm getting air, I'm doing all the right things, and I'm having a crash. So I looked at sugar, right? So I was putting a half a banana in my smoothie each morning. And when I got rid of that and took all sweetness out of the smoothie, or if you wanted to, you could use like a monk fruit sweetener or erythritol. I think those are two great sweeteners that they don't spike your blood sugar. That made a huge difference for me. So I drink like a savory smoothie or most mornings now, and I don't have that crash anymore, which is awesome. But stopping caffeine by 2, 3 in the afternoon is important for most people. But the L-theanine can help with that. That's the supplement that actually kind of offsets the effects of caffeine at night. But yeah, I would say that for me, developing those protocols are great places to start, and for a lot of people, that would be a big shift. And the other thing is, if you're going to have carbs, if you want to have, okay, let's talk about carbs for a second. So when I thought to myself, I'm going to try not eating gluten, I thought, how am I going to not have toast? I love toast. And I could almost make a meal. I can make a meal out of like toast and cheese or toast and peanut butter or whatever. How am I not going to do that? I just said, well, let me try it one day. And it was easy, I found. After I did it one day, after I got over the mental hurdle of not having toast in the morning, it wasn't as much of a struggle. So it's more the mental game and the mental struggle that we block ourselves up with, and that we say, oh, I can't do that. I got to have this. I got to have my whatever it is. I got to have my toast. But if you want to have a carb, have it at supper time, because at that point, you're starting to prepare your body to sleep, right? Even though you're not going to go to sleep for 3 or 4 more hours. That's a good time to have, if you want to have even some fruit, right? That'll help that sugar, actually, the fructose from the fruit is actually going to go into your system, create maybe a small amount of energy, and then you're going to slide down after that. So nighttime's a great time to do that. It seems a little non-intuitive or counterintuitive to the way we typically think about when we eat fruit and when we eat toast. But yeah, I would look at that in the evening.
So I do intermittent fasting,
excellent.
and my first meal is typically around noon. So what meals should we be eating to make sure so we don't get that crash? It sounds like if we avoid carbs and sugars, we shouldn't crash, but I just want to hear that from you more from my layman's.
Right. First off, so in the morning, are you a coffee guy?
No, I only drink green tea right now.
Okay.
I did a gut biome test that told me I shouldn't drink black tea for whatever reason. I don't know why, but now I only drink green tea.
Don't you love green tea though? Yeah,
I do.
I really love
I'm a huge tea fan.
It's much more subtle in its flavor, but I seem to feel really good when I drink it, even compared to like black tea, and certainly compared to coffee, which is like so much more. It's like a hammer, right? Instead of a pat on the back or something. Again, this is bio-individual, but let's start with you. So what do you generally have at lunchtime then? How do you start your day? Start your meal?
Lately, I've been having some Greek yogurt, some granola, and some blueberries, or a frozen fruit, and it kind of more like a cereal, a high protein based cereal component. But that's what I've been doing recently. I wasn't a good streak where I'd do like a green smoothie, but there's so many ingredients, and I never look forward to making it. So I more move towards the simple 3 ingredient thing it's probably got like 25, 30 grams of protein in it on how I prepare it.
Yeah.
So that's what I eat right now.
It's probably got a lot of sugar in it too, though, right?
Maybe the natural sugars from the blueberries. The Greek yogurt is plain, so I don't have flavored yogurt. And I'm sure the granola has a little bit of sugar, but I try to be very cognizant of buying granola that isn't like hyper sweetened. But there's probably a fair amount of sugar. There's natural sugars from the fruit and probably some from the granola and maybe a little bit from the yogurt. I'm not sure. I guess I haven't looked at the nutrition label, but is there like a certain amount of sugar you want to stay under from or is it just rule of thumb? Or
I think what I would suggest for you is, instead of doing, like, try veggies, right? Try starting the day out with vegetables. And I have to tell you, when I switched from gluten to something else, it was going into the fall and I was like, it's getting cold. So I started doing greens in the morning, right? And it's a fabulous way to start your day. It's pumping you up with good stuff. And maybe save those blueberries for after supper and even the cereal, right? The granola. Like that sounds like a great thing to have with your supper. Maybe at lunchtime, that early in the day, I would suggest going with some protein and maybe 4 ounces of protein and veggies and see how you feel.
4 ounces, man. I gotta eat. I'm a big dude, man. 4 ounces is like,
You're in
the size of the palm of my hand, man. How do you
6 ounces for you. So I give you 6. All right, sure.
And you're gonna starve me here. I'm just kidding. I also like snack on nuts and that kind of stuff a
Yeah.
lot. So I'm really fascinated about the energy optimization stuff. To where I think like most people, they treat the symptom of they don't eat and then they treat the symptom of their energy crash because they didn't eat well with coffee. So that's how it feeds this. Now it's just like this new cool thing of I drink coffee, coffee's amazing, or coffee is my happy pill, or all these t-shirts and mugs that like almost like wine, but at least not as bad as alcohol. But it's become almost like this, like how I used to look at bourbon. Like I would talk about bourbon and craft beer like it was part of my personality and part of my identity because it felt like I connected with people when I talked to them about it. And coffee, especially coffee connoisseurs, it's almost to that level.
Oh, yeah.
So there's so much narrative around coffee, right? And it's not an issue for me because I don't drink it because it upsets it hurts me. Like my stomach gets upset and I get the jitters and I can't even focus because there's just too much caffeine for me. I'm really sensitive to it. It's not an issue for me, but I know a lot of people, they're very reliant on coffee and then all the other crap they put in the coffee, like the creamers and the sugars and all that stuff.
It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable.
Yeah. The more we're talking about this, it seems like the carbs and that kind of stuff, they're okay, but maybe have them later in the day when you're like, okay, if you want to prep yourself for sleep, eat that. And I do love that you mentioned that don't eat too close to bedtime, because I've found like my girlfriend, she eats super late. Like she eats at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So whenever I'm at her place, when we're eating late, I sleep like crap because I get the bubble guts going, and then we're not quite at the stage where like we're farting in front of each other yet.
Oh, that's sweet.
I know, right? I get all gassy, so I'm holding it in, and my stomach's like,
oh my
god. So like if I eat too late, then I'm thinking about that for the first couple hours of trying to fall asleep. So this is helpful to help structure that first meal of the day for just optimal energy and then also optimal sleep too. So I think that's super interesting.
Yeah. And there's great things you can do to make, because you were talking about making that first meal easy, which is, I love that. Take a head of celery and chop it up in advance, put it in a mason jar. Buy some mason jars. They're great storage tools for veggies. Put it in a mason jar with water, and then just put the lid on that, put it in the fridge. And when you open up the fridge, you see that. And it's like, yeah, I'll nibble on some celery. I have another one for carrots. And by the way, that water that's left over, that's great stuff. That's full of nutrients too. Drink that water or put it in a smoothie or put it in a soup, right? But yeah, making it easy and accessible, and that's a challenge. Eating late at night, and if that's what your partner's doing, like I said, my wife and I have been married for 13 years, so it's very acceptable for me to not eat with my family. But I guess in a new relationship, that might be kind of weird. But yeah, you see the difference. You see the difference.
Yeah. All right, man. We're coming near the end of the episode, so I want to get into these two questions because I'm curious on your perspective. And you're a well-studied man because you're the first guest that actually had brought up the questions, so you have a little bit of a head start. But that's okay. I'm really curious. So what does it mean to be a man to you?
Yeah. So, Andrew, the way I look at it is that we're here to become closer to our higher selves. One of the exercises that I like to do with clients is to ask them to imagine themselves on their deathbed. Nobody really wants to do that, but you're on your deathbed, and in comes the highest version of you, the part of you that reached all of its potential in your life. And you're laying on your deathbed and you look at that higher version of yourself, and it's too late at that point. So, what does that highest version of yourself look like? And how do we achieve that? So, for me, that highest version is a version that's connected, right? And it's connected with nature, it's connected with our higher power. And so, this is probably a little bit of an unusual answer to your question, but or to this question that you asked each of your guests. But yeah, for me, it's about coming back to ourselves and emerging fully as ourselves. And I guess you could say that's true for women too, right? And it probably is. But yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah. It's not so much
Cool.
about the difference between man and woman is so much about being human. What's it mean to be human? So yeah.
Sure.
Getting back to ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. Just becoming the best version of you. And I think one of the stories that resonates with me is a story that one of my favorite podcasters, Ed Milet, and authors talks about. And I've heard it referenced before. I don't think it's attributed to him, but he talks about it a lot, where at some point in time, we're going to meet, if you believe in heaven, which I do, that we're going to meet our creator. And he envisions a conversation with the creator. And at that meeting, you see the version of yourself that you could have been if you would have delayed that gratification, if you would have strived to become the best version of yourself every single day, and you saw that version of you, and then you do the version. And do you recognize him or do you not?
Oh yeah, there you go. I like that. Yeah,
it's something I think about often, and a little bit, because certainly if I take it too far and too hard on myself, I can beat myself up over not being that man on a given day. But that's okay.
Let's touch on that though, man. That self-judgment, those are like knives, right? They're literally like knives to who we are, right? Oh, that's a really important thing to let go of, because you're a gift. Look at what you're doing, right? And are you perfect? No, you're human. And it's amazing what you're doing. It's amazing what you're bringing to this process of growth, that you're bringing to your family, that you're bringing to your partner, that you're bringing out to the world. It's courageous and it's gorgeous. And there's always going to be the layers of the onion to peel off, right? There's always another layer. I think it was Ram Dass who had said, he said, what I would say to an enlightened person is, if you want to know how enlightened you are, go spend a weekend with your family. And there's always more to peel off there. And there's always more work to do. So it's gorgeous that you're on the path, and beating ourselves up is never going to help. But so it's just, I use that analogy of you have a hammer. Instead of hitting ourselves with a hammer, bring a microscope and take a look and be curious and have fun with your foibles. Foibles. There's a word.
Hey,
you don't hear a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'm working on, is found through my level of introspective, is that there's a level of self-masochism that I'm working through. So some of the things that I'm continuing to work on is giving myself a lot more grace in situations. So I appreciate
great self-awareness, man. That's all it really is. And that's the heart. That grace comes back to the heart. Yeah. Yeah. Just opening your heart up to yourself.
Thanks, man. Yeah. So let's help the men out, give them some momentum, and jump to our second question of, if you were to give them some baby steps to give them some quick wins over the next 7 days, what would you tell them to do that would be little bite-sized pieces where they could start to get those quick wins?
I would say, for me, the number one thing I would say to a broad audience would be to get out in nature. Just try to find time, if you can, even better in the morning, right? Because if you can start your day with a walk each morning, then just 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be a workout. If you do work out in the morning, it's a great warm up for the workout. But having time out around trees and nature and air, because so many of us live indoors, I think that can be a huge opening for people. And it's different for everybody. I started walking every morning last spring, and I made a streak out of it, right? So see if you can do 7 out of 7 days. 7 out of 7 days, I got to walk in this morning, or I got to walk in today in a natural setting. And if you can do 7, see if you can do 20, and then, go from there. I'm on day 260, and I just wouldn't skip it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how hard that rain's coming down. That's a beautiful experience, right? And once you get the streak going, you're not going to want to stop, and it'll just improve your whole day. Or it has the potential to, anyway. I guess everybody's different, but for me, it improves my whole day.
Yeah, man. I like that. So the men want to stay connected with you. I'll attach your social media stuff, but what's like your preferred, is it the Facebook group? What's the plug that you want?
Yeah, the Facebook group is great. Rise Up with Coach Gloak is great. And my website has some good resources on it. I do a monthly newsletter called Health Doesn't Have to Be Hard, because I think it really is about small tweaks. I don't think we need to make it difficult for ourselves. I think small tweaks can make a huge difference. So that's my monthly newsletter. And yeah, I'd love to be in touch, man. And I look forward to seeing what you continue to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. So check out Geoff's website. I saw he has an amazing recipe on there for one of his blog posts. I think it was like a really healthy chicken soup. So that looked delicious. Connect with Geoff, get some resources. So Geoff, I just want to honor you for a second, because I really appreciate the man that you are and who you've become to serve other people. Because I think as men, we are so disconnected and distracted, and most men seek to numbing their circumstances. They're numbing who they are. So I want to honor you for your intention in helping men unburden that energetic block, keeping them from who they could become, and taking the leap out into this world of coaching and consulting and serving the men that need it so much. So I really appreciate your journey and appreciate you as a man, and obviously the value that you added to the men here listening. So thank you so much.
Thanks, brother. I'm taking that in. That's good stuff. And right back at you.